everyone, I'm Caroline. This is Short Skirts and Sarcasm, and Starbucks giveth and Starbucks taketh away, but this is pumpkin spice latte season, so I thought I would make a video inspired by this classic, wholesome, wonderful, fun drink we all associate with fall. And so the vibe of these books I would call like comforting fantasy. They're what I feel like is you get a pumpkin spice latte, you're wearing your cable knit sweater, and you take a walk in a misty cemetery. And I just love that vibe. I love hanging out in my local cemetery. So this is a short list of those kind of books. These are in alphabetical order by title. And I will start out with A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, and the rest of the series, A Gathering of Shadows and A Conjuring of Light. So these are classic fantasy books. I'm also just going to brag that I have this really nice collector set of them. They're great, so pretty. And this series is about Lila, who lives in Grey London, aka the London that I live in, which has no magic at all. But suddenly, this dude wearing a cool coat appears, and she steals something from him. She gets this stone in her possession somehow, and dude in the weird coat, Kel, shows up, tries to get it back. He brings her to his London, which is Red London, and then they have to team up to save the world. Essentially, that's the series. But there are 4 Londons, and they have varying degrees of magic, and there are evil forces at work, and they have to save the empire that Kel serves. I've explained this badly, but it's a really fun series. Next, I want to recommend A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray, and this is also another trilogy. A Great and Terrible Beauty is followed by Rebel Angels and The Sweet Far Thing. And I always think that V.E. Schwab is like the grown-up version of Libba Bray, because Libba Bray writes YA books. So the vibe of this is very, very similar to the Shades of Magic series. So I think if you like one, you will like the other. They are both set in London, and this trilogy follows Gemma Doyle, who has recently lost her mother while she was living in India, and so her father moves her to England, which she has never visited before. Or has she visited? She's never lived in England before, and she gets sent to this fancy boarding school. I think it's 1895. It's the late Victorian era, and she discovers a portal to another world in this school, and she also gets swept up in school politics. She gets into like the circle of really powerful, popular girls at the school, and they also like mess with the portal, and then they unleash bad things upon the world and have to put them back and essentially save the world as well. And this is a delightful series. I really love it. I've read it and reread it, and it holds up pretty well. And it just has, again, comforting fantasy vibes. Like, this is a series that I return to all the time, and it makes me feel warm and happy and fuzzy, even though like quite dramatic and tragic things happen in this series. But it just has a cozy feel. Then I want to recommend Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and the sequel book Before the Coffee Gets Cold, Tales from the Cafe. They're also really beautiful editions. I haven't read this one yet, but I will soon. And this is another sort of like low fantasy sci-fi book. It concerns time travel. You can time travel in this cafe if you sit down at a certain table, but you can only time travel to another time at the same cafe table, and you have to finish your visit by the time your coffee gets cold. So these are essentially 4 short stories that are about 50 pages long, and they concern a lot of like heavy emotional topics. Like, one person relives her breakup, and another person tries to visit her daughter, who she won't really meet because, why? Is it because she's dying? anyway, she goes to the future to visit her daughter. And so it's heavy in some places, but I think overall uplifting and wholesome. Next, I want to recommend Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. This is also set in London. I see a theme. And the main character, Richard, I think his name is, he is from Scotland, but he moves to London, gets a job, gets a girlfriend, and then one day he falls through the cracks of our London and ends up in London below. And he finds out that no one in London above can really see him or remember him, and he feels so odd about it, and he's trying to get back to his normal life. But then he meets a girl called Dor, and she recruits him to help her save London below. And so they go to like the night market, and they travel to Shepherd's Bush, where there are real shepherds, but you don't want to get mixed up with them. And there is also a short story that goes with this, is how the Marquis got his coat back, which is 70 something pages, which I also really recommend, because the Marquis has a cool coat with a bunch of pockets that have stuff in them. And it's kind of similar to Kel's coat in The Shades of Magic. Again, I see a theme. Cool coats. Basically, I just want one of these coats. When will women's clothes have pockets big enough to put stuff in? That's the real question. That's the fantasy book I want to write. It's where all the clothes have pockets. It's gonna be great. And so Richard's journey through London below is whimsical and dramatic and very cozy feeling. And eventually he sort of comes to realize that maybe his life in London above wasn't what he's built it up to be in his mind now that he's stuck in London below. And so there's an element of like a self-discovery journey, as well as a perilous journey, like hero's journey, classic hero's journey. Then I want to recommend The Golem and the Genie by Helena Becker. And this is about Chava, who is a golem, and she gets made in Europe and travels with her master to New York on a boat. However, on the sea voyage, her master dies, and now she is left masterless and can feel everyone's thoughts and wants. And so she has to navigate her, I was gonna say her new life, but her life, because she is like brand new. She didn't have a life before this. She's brought to life on the boat, and then immediately she's alone. And at the same time, a genie is in the neighborhood right next to hers, and he's been alive for thousands of years, and he misses his castle in North Africa, but, or is it Syria? I think it's North Africa. But he has lost that, and so now he's trying to make a life here in New York. But of course, no one can know that he's a genie. So he is doing metalworking. Chava's in the next neighborhood over doing bakery stuff. They both struggle to make friends because they want companionship, but they also are very aware that if anyone finds out who and what they really are, their existence are imperiled. So eventually they become friends and try to help each other out in the various scrapes that they get into. So this is a long book. It's 600 something pages. It's very slow moving, but I think it is beautifully written. And so even though the pacing is very slow, it doesn't feel like it drags. So I thought this was a really beautiful book. I read this in December last year, and what I liked about it the most, apart from the like ethereal fantasy elements of it, were the descriptions of late 1800s New York immigrant neighborhoods. It feels very real with a fantasy layer added on top of it. So it was very good historical fiction and also very good fantasy. Like, both of the elements are really well done and well balanced as well. And it reminded me again of the same sort of vibe as the A Great and Terrible Beauty series. So that's why I want to recommend it. And then last on my list, the classic fantasy book, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And this recently turned 10 years old, which I think is amazing. I missed out on the Illumicrate special edition. I tried to get one, but it sold out in about 10 minutes. So I didn't get that, but I do have this beautiful edition of it that my friend Chloe sent me. And I also have the Kindle version, and I have also read the audiobook version. I didn't love the audiobook version, so I think when I reread it again, I will either read this or my Kindle version. And Celia and Marco are the main characters of this book. They are both trained up by rival magicians, and they embark on a competition against each other, and their competition ground is a circus that is only black and white, and it travels. It's only open at night, and it shows up, and then you can visit it only at night, and then it closes down when the sun rises. And so again, this is it has an ethereal vibe to it. It's really beautifully written, and it has a lot of really great characters. And I think my favorite character is the circus itself, because it feels so real. It feels like a character itself. And because it's the grounds for a competition, it grows and changes as the main characters grow and change as well. And I absolutely love this book. It is one of my top 10, I think, books ever. I think to truly call it a favorite, I will have to read it 2 or 3 more times, considering how many times I've read my favorite books, but it really has the potential to make it up there once I reread it a few more times. So that's it. This is wearing a cable knit sweater, drinking a pumpkin spice latte in a misty cemetery, the video. So I hope you like these books. If you can think of any other books that have this same sort of ethereal, misty cemetery, pumpkin spice latte, cable knit vibes, please let me know in the comments. This is probably one of my favorite subgenres of fantasy, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.